The Winter of Shadows, The Second Call of Mr. Savior. Headphone, The Winter of Shadows, The Second Call of Mr. Savior. Chapter 1. The Silent Snow. Winter had come early that year. The forest was quieter than usual, as if the world itself was holding its breath under a blanket of white. I could feel the cold even before I opened my eyes that morning. Frost coated the windows of my cabin, and the smell of burning pine filled the air. I had just finished feeding the fire when it came again, that familiar pulse in my chest. At first it was faint, a gentle throb, like a heartbeat echoing through my ribs. But it grew stronger, warmer, urgent. I froze. Something, or someone, was in danger. I closed my eyes and let the energy guide me. And then I saw them. A man and a woman, walking hand in hand through the forest. Their faces pale, their breath forming small clouds in the air. Snow fell heavily around them, blurring the trail. They were lost, too far from the village, too close to the valley where the forest beasts hunt in winter. Then the vision vanished, leaving behind a single whisper in my mind. Hurry! I threw on my coat, grabbed my lantern, and stepped into the storm. The world outside was white and endless. The path I knew by heart was now hidden under inches of snow. Each breath burned my lungs, but I pressed on. The deeper I went, the stronger the pull became, like an invisible thread tugging me toward the danger. Some say I'm a fool for chasing these visions, that one day the forest will swallow me whole. Maybe they're right. But when you've seen the light of a soul flicker between life and death, you can't just walk away. After an hour of walking, I found the first clue, footprints half covered by the snow. They were small, hurried, one set heavier than the other. The man must have been carrying something. Or someone. I followed them. Then I heard it, a distant cry. Help! Somebody, please. I started running. The snow hit my face like shards of glass, but I didn't stop. The forest grew darker, the trees denser. The sound of the woman's voice grew weaker. Finally, I reached a small clearing. There they were. A young couple, maybe in their late 20s, huddled near a frozen stream. The man's leg was bleeding, caught in a hunter's steel trap. The woman was shivering, clutching his arm. When she saw me, her eyes widened. Please, he can't move. The wolves, they're close. I knelt beside him, my lantern flickering. His pulse was weak, his face pale from the cold. The metal trap had bitten deep. We don't have much time, I said softly. Stay still. I pressed my hands over the trap. My fingers trembled from the cold, but beneath my palms, that same light began to stir. Faint at first, then bright enough to warm the air around us. The steel hissed, bending slightly. The woman gasped. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Someone who listens," I replied. With one final pull, the trap snapped open. The man groaned in pain but was free. I tore a strip from my coat and wrapped it around his wound. But before we could move, the forest changed. The silence was broken by a low growl. Out of the darkness, a pair of glowing eyes appeared. Then another. And another. Wolves. They circled us slowly, their breath steaming in the cold. The woman clung to me, trembling. I stepped forward, raising my lantern. "Stay behind me," I told them. The first wolf lunged. I swung the lantern. It hit with a burst of fire and light. The animal yelped, retreating. But there were too many. I could feel my strength fading. The light inside me flickered. Then I remembered the river, the day I brought 2 children back from the edge of death. That same force now called to me again. I closed my eyes and let it flow. When I opened them, the ground beneath us shimmered with golden light. The wolves stopped, their growls fading into uneasy silence. They lowered their heads and backed away, as if bowing to something they couldn't understand. The woman's tears froze on her cheeks. What did you do?" "I reminded them," I said quietly, "that even the forest remembers kindness." When the last wolf vanished into the trees, I turned back to the couple. The man could barely stand. I lifted him onto my shoulder. "Come," I said. "My cabin isn't far. You'll be safe there." And as we walked through the snow, the lantern's light cut through the darkness, a small, fragile flame guiding us home. That night, the storm raged until dawn. Inside my cabin, the fire crackled. The couple slept beside the hearth, wrapped in blankets. I sat by the window, watching the snow fall. The world was still, silent again. But deep inside, I knew this wasn't just chance. The forest had brought them to me for a reason. And somewhere beyond the trees, something ancient, something darker, had started to awaken. Headphone Chapter 2: Echoes Beneath the Ice. The storm had not stopped through the night. Snow hammered against the cabin walls, and the wind moaned like a lost spirit. I hadn't slept. My mind was restless, my heart heavy with questions. Who were they, that couple the forest had sent my way? And why, when I saved them, did the wolves retreat as if they had seen something ancient, something sacred? The woman, Clara, had fallen asleep holding her husband's hand. His name was Elias. His leg was bound tightly, and though his face was pale, his breathing was steady now. I had used herbs and salves I'd gathered long ago, remnants of knowledge passed to me by an old healer who once walked these woods. As dawn broke, the storm softened, but it left behind an uneasy silence. The kind of silence that hides whispers beneath it. I stepped outside. The air was sharp and cold, my breath forming small clouds. The forest looked peaceful, but I knew better. The snow always hides what lies beneath. Down by the river, the ice had thickened overnight. The water that once sang freely now slept under a sheet of glass. I walked closer, lantern in hand, tracing the frost patterns. That's when I saw it. Footprints. Not mine. Not the couple's. Too large for a wolf. Too heavy for a deer. The steps were deep and uneven, as if whatever had passed there had struggled against the storm, or dragged something behind it. My pulse quickened. I followed them to the edge of the frozen stream, where the ice was cracked open. Something dark lingered beneath the surface, a shadow that moved when I did. At first, I thought it was a reflection. But then the ice groaned, and a sound rose from below. A whisper. I froze, every muscle in my body tense. The whisper wasn't human. It was low, drawn out, like the echo of something trapped deep below. I knelt, brushing snow away from the ice. The surface shimmered faintly, like light struggling through fog. And for a heartbeat, I saw a face. Eyes wide open, mouth twisted in silent fear. Then it was gone. I stumbled back, my breath caught in my throat. Whatever it wasn't natural. I had felt danger before, but this was something else. This was ancient. From the forest behind me came a faint sound, movement. I turned, scanning the trees. A shadow darted between the trunks, too fast to follow. "Who's there?" I called. My voice echoed, unanswered. Only the forest replied. I could feel the energy inside me begin to stir, that same invisible warmth that always came before something happened. But this time, it didn't feel like a warning. It felt like a call. A pull toward something buried beneath that frozen river. When I returned, Clara was awake, sitting by the fire. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. "Where's Elias?" she asked, voice trembling. I froze. "He was right here when I left." She looked toward the door, her hands shaking. "He said he heard someone calling his name. He thought it was you." My chest tightened. "When?" "Moments ago." I rushed outside. The snow around the cabin was fresh, except for one set of footprints leading away toward the river. Elias's footprints. I followed the trail as fast as I could, the cold biting through my coat. The path led straight to the riverbank, to that same cracked patch of ice. And there, in the middle of it, I saw him, kneeling. He was staring into the ice, whispering something. His voice was calm, distant, almost dreamlike. "Elias!" I shouted. "Don't move. The ice will break." But he didn't hear me. Or maybe he couldn't. I ran forward. The ice creaked under my boots. Then a scream. Elias was gone. The river swallowed him whole. Without hesitation, I threw myself forward, breaking through the ice. The shock of the cold was blinding. Knives in my lungs, darkness in my eyes. I reached into the freezing water, searching blindly. My hands brushed against something. His coat. I grabbed him, pulling with everything I had. My chest burned, the cold crushing every breath. But then that light came again. Not from me this time. From below. A golden glow surrounded us. The water grew warm for an instant, and I felt Elias's body move. His eyes opened, but they weren't his. They glowed with faint silver light. I pulled him onto the snow, gasping, coughing. He lay there, staring blankly at the sky. "Elias!" I shouted. "Speak to me." His lips trembled. And then, in a voice that wasn't his own, he whispered, "She waits beneath the ice." Then he went still. I sat there for a long time, my heart pounding. I didn't understand what I had just heard or seen. But I knew one thing for certain. Whatever haunted this forest, whatever had called to him from the depths, it was no longer just a danger. It was awake, and I could feel it now, its eyes on me, watching, waiting. In all my years helping those in need, I had never faced a darkness that could whisper my name. But in that frozen winter, the forest had changed. Headphone Chapter 3, The Whispering Trees. I didn't return to the cabin right away. I couldn't. Elias lay still in the snow, his face pale as the winter sky. I had seen death before, but not like this. His body was alive, yet his spirit felt absent, as though something had borrowed him. His wife, Clara, came running moments later. When she saw him, her scream cut through the forest like the crack of thunder. She fell to her knees, shaking him, begging him to wake. But he didn't answer. He only breathed. Eyes open. Still. I carried him back to the cabin. Clara followed in silence, her tears freezing against her cheeks. That night, the fire burned low. I sat beside him, watching his chest rise and fall, listening to the wind whisper through the chimney. The whisper wasn't just outside anymore. It was inside. Soft. Rhythmic. Like words forming beneath the sound of crackling wood. And in those whispers, I began to hear my name. Salvador. The first time I heard it, I thought I imagined it. The second time, the flames flickered in response. I stood. "Who's there?" No one answered, only the slow groan of the trees outside. I grabbed my lantern, pushed open the door, and stepped into the cold. The forest was alive. Every tree seemed to move, their branches swaying though there was no wind. The air shimmered faintly, a soft glow spreading through the mist, like moonlight trapped in fog. And then I heard it. A chorus of whispers. Dozens of voices. All around me. "Do not fear the dark. It has always known your name. The forest remembers its guardian." I dropped to one knee, clutching my chest. The warmth inside me, that same light that had saved lives before, now burned brighter than ever. My lantern dimmed, as though the forest's light was stronger than any flame I could make. I closed my eyes and let the warmth expand. When I opened them again, I was no longer in my forest. Or at least, not the one I knew. The snow was gone. The trees were green, full of life. The air was warm. And in front of me stood a figure, tall, cloaked in roots and leaves. Her eyes shimmered gold like sunlight through amber. "Who are you?" I asked. She smiled gently. "I am the memory of this forest," she said, her voice echoing through the air. "Once I protected it, long before men built fires, long before names like yours existed." Her gaze softened. But then something broke the balance. Something beneath the ice woke too soon. I stepped closer. "The river. Elias, is that what took him?" She nodded slowly. "A spirit older than light itself. It feeds on fear. Every time a soul loses hope within these woods, it grows stronger. And now it stirs again, hungry for warmth, for life." My hands tightened around the lantern. "Then I'll stop it." She looked at me, sorrow in her eyes. "You already have, many times. But every time you give your light to another, a part of you fades. You cannot keep saving everyone, Salvador. Not without losing yourself completely." Her words cut deep. I had always known that each act of healing left me weaker, the exhaustion, the fading glow. But hearing it spoken aloud felt like a prophecy. "Why me?" I asked. "Why do I have this light?" She lifted a hand toward my chest, where the faint glow pulsed beneath my coat. "Because you carry a fragment of me," she said. "When you were a child, the forest chose you. You were dying, and I gave you my breath. You live between worlds now, part man, part memory." The realization left me breathless. I wanted to deny it, but somewhere deep down I had always known. She stepped back, her form beginning to fade. "When the ice breaks again, you will face what lies beneath. It will not fear you, Salvador. It remembers you." And with that she was gone. I gasped, blinking. The warmth vanished, replaced once more by the cold sting of winter air. The forest stood silent again, still and white. I turned and hurried back to the cabin. Inside, Clara was sitting beside Elias, humming softly, an old lullaby. But when she looked at me, I saw it in her eyes. Fear. Her eyes were hollow, glowing faintly blue. And even through the storm, I could hear her voice. "Salvador, come back to me." It was the same voice I'd heard in my mind the night before. The same voice that once guided me when I saved lives. But now it was different. Colder. Hungrier. I stepped back, slamming the door shut. "She's here," I told Clara. "The mother beneath the ice." Clara began to cry. "Why us? What does she want from us?" I hesitated, because deep down I already knew. "She doesn't want you," I said softly. "She wants what's inside me." For years I'd felt the light inside me, the power to find people in danger, to reach them before it was too late. It had always felt like a gift, a blessing. But maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was a debt, a bargain struck long ago with something that now wanted to collect. That thought stayed with me all day. I watched Elias, unmoving but still glowing with that silver light. I watched Clara, trembling with fear and fatigue. And outside, I could still see her, the figure in white, standing in the snow, waiting. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. But every few minutes, I could hear her whisper through the wind. "Your time is ending, Salvador." As night fell again, I made a choice. I took my coat, my lantern, and the small pouch of herbs I'd kept for years, the same herbs I used when saving the boys by the river. Clara begged me not to go. "She'll kill you," she cried. I smiled faintly. "I don't think she wants to kill me," I said. "I think she wants to take me home." I stepped into the storm. Snow bit at my face like shards of glass. The forest loomed ahead, black and white, endless. Every tree seemed to lean toward me as I walked. Every shadow whispered my name. And then I saw her, closer this time, standing at the frozen river. Her dress was torn, her skin like marble, her hair floating in the windless cold. When she spoke, her voice was both everywhere and nowhere. "You carry my light," she said. "It belongs to me." I took a breath, forcing the fear down. "If it belongs to you," I said, "then why did you give it to me?" She smiled. A strange, beautiful, terrifying smile. "To see what you would do with it." Her eyes gleamed. "You've spent your years saving others. Now, save yourself." The river cracked behind her, glowing faintly blue beneath the ice. I felt warmth inside my chest, the same light she was speaking of, fighting to break free. I dropped to my knees. It burned. It felt like my soul was being torn open from within. "Take it," I shouted. "If this is what you want, take it." But she didn't move. She only whispered, "No, you must give it." And suddenly I understood. This was not about surrender. It was about choice. I stood, shaking, the light inside me pulsing against my ribs. And I thought of every life I'd saved, every cry I'd answered, every person who had lived because I listened to that voice. If this light truly came from her, then maybe it wasn't a curse after all. Maybe it was a bridge. And bridges are meant to be crossed both ways. I reached out my hand. The light poured from my chest like mist, glowing golden in the snow. It drifted toward her, slowly, gently, touching her face. She closed her eyes. And for the first time, I saw something I never expected. Tears. Silver tears, falling down her frozen cheeks. She whispered, "Thank you, my son." And then she was gone, dissolving into snow and light, fading back into the frozen air. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty river. The storm had stopped. The forest was silent again. And though I felt weaker than ever before, I knew I was still alive. Because some lights never truly die. Headphone Chapter 6. The Return to the Cabin. When I opened my eyes, the world was no longer how I'd left it. The sky was pale, the kind of gray that hides behind the morning after a storm. The trees stood still again, heavy with white, their branches no longer reaching for me. And on the river bank, there was no sign of her. No footprints. No broken ice. Only silence. The mother beneath the ice was gone. But the light inside me, it had changed. It no longer burned. It hummed, like something sleeping inside, waiting for my command. I walked back toward the cabin. The path was unfamiliar, reshaped by the blizzard. But somehow, I didn't need direction. I could feel where home was, as though the forest itself was gently guiding me back. The air smelled different now, cleaner, sharper. I knew something had ended that night. But I also knew something else had begun. The cabin came into view, half buried under snow. Smoke no longer rose from the chimney. For a moment, I feared the worst. I hurried forward, pushing the door open with a crack of ice. Inside was silence. The fire had died completely. The candles had burned out. And Clara was nowhere to be seen. "Clara!" I called out. No answer. My boots echoed against the floorboards as I walked deeper inside. The air was cold, heavy with stillness. Then I noticed something strange. Tiny drops of water, trailing from the door toward the hearth. And there, beside the ashes of the fire, lay a shape. A small pool of melted snow. At first, I thought it was just that. But as I knelt closer, I saw what was floating at its center. A silver pendant. The one Clara used to wear around her neck. I picked it up carefully. It was warm. Too warm for the freezing air. I turned it in my hand, and on the back I noticed something new. An engraving, words that hadn't been there before. Saved by light. I felt my throat tighten. That wasn't a pendant anymore. It was a sign. She had been taken, but not by death. She had been protected. I heard her then. Not clearly. Just a murmur carried by the wind seeping through the walls. "Thank you, Señor Salvador." It was soft, grateful, fading away as quickly as it came. And I understood. The same light that once belonged to the mother beneath the ice. It had passed through me. And now it had found her. I rebuilt the fire slowly, piece by piece. As the flames rose, I saw Elias's body still lying near the corner. His skin no longer held that silver glow. He looked peaceful, like a boy sleeping after a long dream. When I touched his forehead, there was no cold. Just quiet warmth. Maybe he had found peace too. For hours I sat there, staring at the fire. The storm had cleansed everything. The air, the land, even my soul. For years I had believed my gift was a duty, a burden I could never rest from. Now I understood it differently. It wasn't just about saving lives. It was about returning light to those who had lost it, whether they lived or passed beyond this world. And I was merely its carrier. A vessel. A messenger. When I stepped outside later that evening, the forest was quiet. But I could feel eyes watching me again. Not the old ones. Not the hungry, hollow kind. These were gentle. Grateful. The souls I had once saved. The children. The lost travelers. And maybe even Clara herself. They lingered in the silence of the woods, invisible but present. And somewhere within the wind, I could hear them whisper one word. Guardian. I smiled, for the first time in what felt like years. And as I looked up, the clouds finally parted. The first sunlight of winter touched the treetops. Golden. Pure. And in that light, I made myself a promise. As long as I could still feel danger in my heart, as long as I could still hear those cries in the distance, I would keep walking, keep listening, keep saving. Because that's what light does. It never stops looking for the lost. Headphone Chapter 7, The Village of Shadows. It had been months since I'd walked the road to the village. Or maybe only days. Time felt different after that night by the river. As though each breath carried both the memory of the past and the echo of something not yet born. The forest had begun to thaw. Water trickled down the roots. The snow was thinner, softer. The land was waking up again. So I followed the narrow path toward the valley, toward the place I once called home. When I reached the first houses, the air felt wrong. Not dangerous, just still. No smoke from the chimneys. No laughter from the children. Only the sound of wind slipping between the doors. The village looked the same. But something beneath it had changed. Every window I passed reflected my own face, and behind my reflection, a faint silver glow. "Hello," I called out. My voice bounced back to me. Softer, smaller. Then I heard it. A door creaking open. From one of the old cottages, an elderly woman stepped out. She wore thick furs and had eyes that shone like tiny pieces of the moon. When she saw me, she smiled, faintly trembling. "Salvador," she whispered, "we thought you were gone." I walked closer, uncertain. Her voice was kind, but there was something strange about her presence. She wasn't afraid of me. She wasn't even surprised. It was as if she'd known I would return. "I followed the snow," I said. I didn't know if anyone was still here. Her eyes glimmered brighter. "Oh, we are here," she said softly. "All of us. But the world is not the same as you left it." She led me toward the village square. And there, I stopped breathing. Dozens of people stood in silence, their faces calm, their skin pale. Every one of them had faint silver eyes. Children played quietly, moving like dreamers. Old men nodded to me as if greeting a priest. But none of them spoke above a whisper. It was as though the entire village shared one heartbeat, one pulse, one light. "What happened here?" I asked. The old woman looked at me, tears shining. "The storm," she said. "The same storm that took you. It changed us." I felt my hands trembling. "Changed you? How?" She smiled, bittersweet. "We began to hear things. Whispers in the wind. Voices in the trees. Some say it was the forest speaking. Some say it was you." I stepped back. "Me?" "Yes," she said. "When you vanished, the storm ended. The light came from the mountains. And one by one, the sick began to rise. The lost began to dream again. The dying began to breathe." Her voice broke. "You saved us, Salvador. Even when you were gone." I didn't know what to say. I looked around the square, and saw faces I recognized. The blacksmith who once broke his leg in a landslide. The child who had fallen into the river years ago. The mother I'd found unconscious in the storm. All alive. All shining faintly with that same light that once nearly destroyed me. And I realized something that chilled me to the bone. The light didn't leave with the mother beneath the ice. It had spread. Through them. Through everyone. As I stood there, the people began to hum. Softly. In unison. A sound that came from the ground, from their chests, from the air itself. I closed my eyes, and the light inside me responded. It pulsed. Connected. I felt them all, every heartbeat, every thought, woven into a single living thread. And at its center, I felt her. The mother. But she was different now. Calm, warm, no longer hungry. She had become something else. Something like peace. The woman touched my shoulder gently. "We are no longer afraid," she said. "You showed us how to live with the cold." Her words felt heavier than any blessing I'd ever received. I looked at the sky, the same color as the river ice that had once threatened to kill me. And I whispered, mostly to myself, "The cold was never our enemy. It was truth." The cold had been a test, a mirror for the warmth we carry within. That night, I stayed in the village again. For the first time in years, I slept under a roof surrounded by people. Their light kept the darkness away, a faint glow that shimmered even when the candles went out. And as I drifted into sleep, I heard her voice once more, softer now, almost human. "Guard them, Salvador. But remember, light is not to be owned. It must always move, from one heart to another." When I awoke, dawn had broken. And though I didn't know where I would go next, I knew one thing for certain. The world still needed saving. And my light, their light, would guide me to whoever was lost next. Headphone Chapter 8. The Silent Bell. Narrator. Steady, reflective voice. Morning came softly, with a sky the color of faded silver. The village had awakened to life again. Smoke rose from the chimneys, laughter returned to the air. For a brief moment, I believed the world had healed. But peace in these lands never lingers for long. It was during that morning prayer, in the square, that I heard it, the bell. At first, I thought it was an echo from the church tower. But the sound was wrong. It was distant and hollow, as if buried beneath the mountains themselves. One toll. Then silence. Then another. Every villager froze where they stood. Their eyes, once calm and silvery, now flickered with something I hadn't seen since before the thaw. Fear. An old man beside me crossed himself and whispered, "The Bell of the Lost." I turned to him, confused. "The what?" He looked up toward the north ridge, where the peaks disappeared into clouds. "They say it rings when the mountain wakes." I felt a weight settle deep in my chest. Something familiar. The same feeling I'd known before every rescue. That strange vibration behind my ribs. That warning from the unseen. Only this time it was stronger. Darker. The bell tolled again, 3 times, slow and heavy. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. By noon, I'd packed a small satchel, herbs, bread, and a talisman I carved during my years alone. The villagers tried to stop me. "Don't go, Salvador," they pleaded. "No one who follows that sound ever returns." I smiled gently. That's why I must go. The road to the mountains was cruel. The snow had hardened into glass. The trees whispered, their branches scraping against the sky like bones. With every step, I felt that pulse again. A call, a voice behind the bell. Sometimes it sounded like a child crying. Other times, like the wind mourning through an empty cathedral. But underneath it all was a heartbeat. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was alive. By dusk, I reached the edge of the forest. The valley below glowed faintly, as if moonlight were rising from the ground. And there, at the center of the white expanse, stood an ancient monastery, long abandoned, carved into the side of the mountain itself. Its tower was broken, its windows black, and yet, from somewhere deep within its stone heart, the bell had rung. Inside, everything smelled of time, dust, incense, frozen air. My breath formed ghosts before me. As I moved through the halls, I saw marks on the walls. Strange, circular carvings that pulsed faintly with light. Like the veins of the world were glowing through the stone. I touched one with my hand, and the vision struck me like lightning. I saw figures kneeling in prayer, their robes dark, their faces hidden. And in the center of the room, a massive bell made of pure ice. It wasn't hung from any frame. It floated, and it breathed. The vision faded as quickly as it came, leaving me trembling, the echo of that frozen bell still ringing in my bones. Then a whisper, a voice. Not the mother's this time. Something older, colder. "You carry her warmth," it said, "but the world still belongs to the cold." The air turned sharp. Frost spread across the floor beneath my feet. I could feel the temperature plummet, but I didn't move. I simply whispered back, then let the cold speak. The sound blasted through the monastery, shattering ancient glass, blowing out every candle, and filling the world with blinding white. And in that explosion of light, I saw them, figures emerging from the snow. Pale, tall, silent. Their eyes glowed like the villagers, but their faces carried no life. The frozen ones. The lost. They reached for me, their hands outstretched not in anger, but in longing. They wanted warmth. They wanted to remember what it was like to live. And I, for the first time, understood what the light inside me truly was. Not a gift, not a curse, a bridge between life and what waits beyond. I pressed my hands together, and light poured through the cracks between my fingers. The warmth spread, touching their hands, their faces, their silence. One by one, the frozen began to melt, not into water, but into song. Their voices lifted, merging with the tolling bell. and for a moment the whole mountain sang. When the light dimmed, I stood alone again. The carvings on the walls no longer glowed. The silence was deep, peaceful. But in that stillness, the bell whispered one last time, "Not all who are lost wish to be found." I turned toward the exit, carrying that phrase like a shadow behind my heart. The path back to the village glimmered faintly in the night, and as I walked, I realized, some bells ring to call the living, others ring to warn them, and this one was not done ringing yet. Headphone Chapter 9. The Snow That Remembered. By the time I left the monastery, the sky had turned to steel. No moon, no stars, only a soft, endless snowfall that erased the world in silence. Each flake that touched my skin carried a strange warmth, as if it remembered the light I'd released inside those walls. The mountain, too, seemed to breathe. Slow, deep, alive. 4 hours, I walked. Not toward the village. Not toward safety. Just forward. Following a pull I didn't understand. The wind whispered my name more than once. At least, I thought it did. Sometimes it sounded like Salvador. Other times, like Savior. I tried to ignore it. But the more I walked, the more the snow began to change. It glittered faintly blue beneath my boots, and when I looked closer, I realized it wasn't reflecting light. It was emitting it. The snow was alive, or at least remembering life. Then I saw them again, shapes moving within the snowfall. Not the frozen ones from the monastery, but smaller, flickering, almost human. Children, hundreds of them, running through the snow without leaving footprints. Their laughter was soft, like chimes in the fog. One of them stopped and turned toward me. A girl, no older than 10, her eyes bright as stars. "Why are you here?" she asked. Her voice was kind, curious. But when I opened my mouth, no sound came out. She smiled. "You can't speak here," she said. "Not with words. You have to remember." And then, images rushed into my mind. A boy screaming by a river. A woman clutching her child beneath a falling tree. A man swallowed by the snow. All the souls I had saved. Their memories flickered through me like sparks in a storm. And at the center of it all, the girl. She reached out and touched my chest, right where my light had once burned brightest. "You're not supposed to carry them alone," she said softly. "The light isn't yours to keep." "I know," I whispered, though I didn't speak aloud. "I never wanted to keep it." She tilted her head. "Then why are you still afraid of letting go?" I didn't answer, because she was right. There was still fear inside me. Fear that if I let go of that warmth, I would vanish. That without saving others, I would no longer exist. The girl smiled sadly. "That's not salvation," she said. "That's loneliness." She stepped closer, and suddenly the snow began to swirl around us. Faster, brighter, until the world became nothing but light. Then, silence. When it cleared, I was standing in the center of the village square. But it wasn't the same village anymore. The people were gone. The houses were dust. Only the snow remained, glowing faintly in the places where memories once lived. The girl appeared beside me again. "This is the memory of the world," she said. "Every kindness, every sorrow, every life that ever touched the snow." I looked down and saw faces forming beneath the frost, smiling, breathing, fading again. "Do you see?" she whispered. "The snow remembers everything, even the smallest act of warmth." Tears burned my eyes, because I finally understood. The light wasn't meant to conquer the cold. It was meant to coexist with it. Without the cold, there would be nothing to reflect the light back. Nothing to remind us that warmth is precious. That saving someone isn't about power. It's about memory. I knelt down and pressed my hand into the frozen ground. It glowed faintly beneath my touch. Not with my energy, but with theirs. All the lives I had crossed paths with. All the souls I had touched, even for a moment. Their memories pulsed in the earth, like quiet stars beneath the ice. And I whispered to them, "Thank you for remembering me." When I stood again, the girl was gone. Only her laughter lingered in the air. But her final words stayed carved in my mind. Your story doesn't end when you stop saving lives. It ends when you stop believing that they can be saved. I looked to the horizon, and saw the first light of dawn break through the storm. Golden, alive, and in that fragile sunrise, for the first time in a long while, I felt something simple, something human. Peace. Headphone Chapter 10. The Last Light. Dawn came like a whisper. The storm had passed. The sky was no longer gray, but pale gold. A light so fragile it could almost be broken by touch. I had walked far from the village, beyond the forest, beyond the frozen rivers, into the wide endless plain where winter slept. Each step I took left no mark behind. The snow closed over my footprints, as if the world itself was ready to move on. And perhaps so was I. The light inside me had grown faint, not weaker, just quieter, as if it knew the end of its journey was near. For days I wandered, guided by instinct alone. No visions, no voices, only the soft hum of my own heartbeat. Until one night, under a full moon, I reached the edge of the world. At least, that's what it felt like. Before me stretched a frozen lake, vast, unmoving, its surface so smooth it mirrored the stars perfectly. At the center of the lake stood a single figure, cloaked in white, motionless. I knew who it was before I even stepped forward. The mother beneath the ice. The ancient spirit of winter, the one whose power had once nearly consumed me. I walked toward her, each step echoing across the glassy surface. She didn't move, didn't breathe. Only the faint shimmer of her eyes told me she was alive. When I stopped before her, she spoke, not with sound, but with presence. "You have carried the warmth well." Her voice whispered through the air. "But warmth cannot exist without the cold to cradle it." I bowed my head. "I've seen the truth of it," I said softly. "The light isn't meant to fight the cold, only to remind us that it can be endured." Her expression was unreadable, ancient, gentle. "And yet," she said, "you still burn with it, even now, when the world no longer needs saving." I lifted my gaze to hers. "The world always needs saving," I replied, "even if only one heart at a time." For a moment we simply stood there, the savior and the mother, the warmth and the cold. Then she extended her hand. In her palm a faint spark of light appeared, pale blue, pure and endless. "This was once mine," she said, "the first light of the world. But you've carried its echo longer than any mortal ever has. Now you must choose." "Choose?" I asked. She nodded. "Keep it, and you will live forever, bound to wander, to heal, to bear the weight of every soul you touch. Give it away, and your journey ends. But your light will live on, in others." The air grew still. The reflection of the moon trembled across the lake. I looked down at my hands, glowing faintly gold beneath the frost, and I thought of the children, the villagers, the voices in the snow. The girl who reminded me that the world remembers kindness. I already knew my answer. Slowly, I took her hand. The light in her palm merged with mine, two flames becoming one. It burned, yes, but not with pain. It felt like being unmade and reborn at the same time. The warmth spread through me, through the lake, through the air itself. Every snowflake around us began to glow. Tiny lanterns, carrying memory, carrying life. And then, with one final breath, I released it. The light burst from me like dawn breaking open the dark. It flowed across the world, into the rivers, the trees, the mountains. It filled every place that had ever known despair. And where it passed, winter did not vanish. It softened, balanced. The cold became gentle, the warmth eternal. And I became neither. I remember falling to my knees. The air filled with light. The mother smiled. Not in triumph, in peace. "You were never meant to save the world alone," she whispered. "You were meant to remind it how to save itself." Her hand touched my forehead, and then everything faded. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in a field of thawing earth. Spring had come. The river sang again. And far in the distance, I saw the village rebuilt, alive, thriving, unaware of the miracle that had passed. Children played where the frost once claimed their lives. The sun glowed softly above, and on the wind I heard laughter. Mine and not mine. I am no longer a man, no longer a savior, just a whisper in the wind, a memory in the snow, a warmth that passes from one heart to another. That is enough, because salvation was never about living forever. It was about ensuring that love does. And so, wherever the cold returns, remember me, not as a legend, not as a hero, just as the one who reminded the world that even the faintest light is enough to guide someone home.